Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call this meeting of Independent School District 544 to order. Due to the current federal and state emergency declaration, this meeting of the Fergus Falls School District School Board meeting is being conducted in accordance with the Minnesota Statutes 13D.021. The meeting by telephone or other electronic means. And with that, clerk, will you establish a form for us, please?
Certainly. Kirby Anderson.
Present.
Natalie Knutson. Melanie Cole. Absent. Matthew Lemke.
Here.
Missy Hermes. Present. And Stephen Vigasa.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Steve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kirby. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Natalie Knutson.
Yes.
Matthew Lemke.
Yes.
Missy Hermes, yes. Stephen Vigasa.
Yes.
Kirby Anderson.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to a resolution of acknowledgements.
I'd like to offer the following resolution and move for its adoption. A thank you to Joel and Jamie Anderson for the donation to the Otter Angel account, an account created to anonymously assist families unable to pay for student meals.
Do I have a second on that resolution?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Matthew Lemke.
Yes.
Missy Hermes, yes. Stephen Vigasa.
Yes.
Kirby Anderson.
Yes.
Natalie Knutson.
Yes.
The resolution is adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to our next items is reports, and we have Mark Masson here to talk about the Lincoln School project and also facility update. Welcome, Mark.
Hello, Matt and the board. Just a brief update on where we're at on the Lincoln project for those of you in the public who don't know what the Lincoln project is. That is the former Target retail store here in town that is being converted into the district's ECFE preschool center and will be sharing space with a children's corner for daycare. That project is well underway. Right now, as we speak, the interior of the building has got the metal studs up, and in some spots we're starting with the sheetrock. The ventilation system is mostly done, but the big equipment is in the building and being connected up and so forth. Windows are in place now, and the first coat of the parking lot was put on last week. So they're hoping to get that final wear coat on this week. Some of the other things that will happen here shortly is just an ongoing work on entering more light into the building. We're in the process of putting what they call sono tubes, which are basically skylight type of device that goes into the classrooms. And also there is going to be an area in the cafeteria that's opened up in the building and a large skylight's going up in there. In terms of the project schedule, it is about 2 weeks behind, but from what I can tell, the sheetrockers might make some of that time up. And so we're looking at the end of December right now for the turnover of the building to the school district. So I still think that may be a little optimistic, but I think that is, in looking at what they're doing, I think they look like they're pretty much on time. So, other than the 2 weeks. So with that, you said also other facility items. I only have 2 other things that I'm working on since I am retired.
Only 2.
So, but the other thing is just finishing up. One is the tennis courts. We have tried to resurface those this summer and ran into a snag with one of the vendors claiming that the surface is in too tough a shape in order for him to do his work. And so we're in the process of trying to see if we can get a different vendor. We have tried that. And the other option is to maybe mill and resurface about an inch of asphalt on the surface to make it better. Since we've missed the fall sports season anyway, we have gained some time here in order to make these decisions and maybe do something in the spring instead. Then other project that I have is the chiller. We've been trying to do an enhancement to the chiller here for air conditioning and for ice making at the arena for several years now. And we got to a point where the device that had been donated to the school district wasn't quite working correctly. So as of last Friday, I was able to get a hold of a gentleman who claimed chiller experience, and he further then referred me to two other gentlemen who are experts in absorber chiller systems, which is what we have. And one of those gentlemen is going to be here tomorrow. So we'll get a handle on, we think it's a startup problem. We think that we just don't know how to get this device started up. And with luck, a couple of tweaks of something will make it work. That's the positive side of things. The negative side is, of course, we may need more money to make the thing work. But for now, that's where I'm at. Any questions?
Are they doing anything in the parking lot for the new ECFE building at all? I haven't been able to look at the full and total plans, but will there be any sort of, outside play area or anything like that?
Yes, if you were to drive up to the Jimmy John's, that area, and
Sure.
go by, you can kind of see the outline of it.
Okay.
About a third of the parking lot is now going to become a playground area. And that may sound not like a lot, but when you measure it out, it's about the size of a football field. So it is pretty large.
That's great.
And then in the future, if the building gets expanded even further, the district also purchased 8 acres of land adjacent, that's behind Nelson Ford.
Oh, okay.
And so there's quite a bit of green space out there.
That's wonderful, wonderful. Couldn't be happier. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Mark.
thank you.
Okay, moving on to our next report is Kirby Anderson, 544 Education Foundation and Finance.
Okay. Nothing to finance today, but we did meet on September 10th, last week, on Thursday, in person over at Roosevelt. We had our regular monthly meeting, and we also had the annual board meeting. And at the annual board meeting, went through and approved the budget for next year. Bonnie's Denzel was there and gave us an update on the investments, which took a pretty good hit in February-March timeframe, but have since come back. And so the foundation the finances are healthy right now. We did review the classroom wish list from all from staff, and I think it was $15,500 was the total of the requests. And so far they've funded just over $7,000 of that. I think they have another $3,000 in undesignated. So they'll be funding $10,000 of that classroom wish list through the 544 Foundation. This time of year, they also go to all of our staff and look for payroll deductions, as well as going to members of the community for major donor campaigns and the various other levels of donations. One of the things we're looking at, we're looking at the all-school reunion next year, and it was scheduled to be at the Bigwood, and now the Bigwood Event Center has lost their management company, so they're not taking any reservations after, I believe, once the existing ones are done, so in April, I think. So we're looking at the Armory and maybe a couple other spots, but right now, that's probably the only one that's feasible at this point for the number of people we have. We have 2 board members who are retiring after 9 years of service. I'd like to recognize Linda Mellon, she was outgoing president, and Tony Renz. And Tony was a real key person for running the annual golf tournament that was one of our major fundraisers for the 544. They do have 2 new board members coming in, and I'm going to wait and let the 544 people release that information. I think they'll have something coming out shortly on that. And then Jeff did give an update to the group on week one, at least as far as through from Tuesday and Wednesday. So he filled the board members in on what's been happening around the district. So that's all I have. Any questions or comments?
Questions for Kirby? Thank you, Kirby. Melanie Cole is not here, so Missy Hermes, Staff Development and Policy.
Well, normally I would be able to report on staff development, but we delayed our meeting until next Monday. So, but I can tell you that Kristen Toole, who is the chair of that committee, sent out a really great email to staff, and that includes paraprofessionals. They also can participate in the staff development that the school board sets aside as our budget, $35,000 a year for staff development. And Kristen made sure people that are new will know about that. I think that's one reason why the meeting was delayed. And then also just reminding people that the trainings need to match with our district goals. And so to really think that through when you're deciding that you want to access staff development funds. And also, I just want to thank the people that are on that staff development committee because they agreed, all of them, to extend for an extra year because of the pandemic. And some of them were going to go off the committee at the end of last year, and they have extended for an additional year, so we appreciate that. That's staff development. Okay, policy, we met at the end of August, and we already have talked at a school board meeting about some of the things we discussed. It was kind of, I wouldn't say an emergency meeting, but we needed to talk right away about a masking policy and also the Title IX changes that took place. And so we had a first reading of Title IX, but in addition, I just want to, I attended a workshop, and one of the things that the Minnesota School Board Association recommended is that school boards look through their policies and use an equity lens. And so that fits already with what we're doing as a school district, thinking about equity and diversity, and we talked about that, and so that just reinforces what we are already doing. I know Steve is going to talk about the legislature in a little bit. One of the things that the legislature asked, and I guess this is from a student, so that's pretty great that they gave input, is that school districts, we already have policies about vaping or e-cigarettes, whatever you want to call it, but they're asking school districts to add into that, not just a don't vape, but why not? So add a policy on awareness, so why is this bad? And so that's something we can look at in the future.
Any questions for Missy? Thank you, Missy. Natalie Knudsen, Wellness and Buildings and Grounds.
Well, I think Mark covered the building and grounds piece for now, and no updates for wellness.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. Okay, under my reports for Lakes Country Service Co-op Board, we just had our regular school board, regular board meeting on last Thursday, and it was just a regular board meeting with just some policies that were first readings and just some regular business. So there's really not a tremendous amount to report on the Lakes Country Service Co-op Board piece of it. For Minnesota High School League, and we have an item that we're going to be addressing here within our agenda, is one thing that came out that took place is an increase in membership dues and fees, and part of the reason of that is that the Minnesota High School League is funded about 75% of their funding revenue comes from ticket sales, sponsorships, and broadcasting revenue at the state tournaments and the playoffs. And so they, of course, since that did not take place last year for the well, most of the girls' basketball and all the boys' basketball and then the spring sports. It entailed that they, again, we're in a deficit. And trying to relook at how they could continue to operate. They had a finance group come together, a finance task force come together with some recommendation. Normally their budget is $9.1 million. This coming, they have reduced that or approved an annual budget of $5 million for this year. The major reduction comes from, of course, is the expenses at the state tournament. So your tournaments, both on the revenue and expense side. The other part that they did is they also reduced some of their staff, did not rehire some staff, and then they looking at a different base of how to fund their general operation, and that was going through a basic cost for the Minnesota High School League through membership fee based on traditional membership dues and activity fees. And so they proposed and approved to pass on some additional fees onto school districts that participate in the Minnesota High School League, and we are one of them. And so they, what they did is they increased our activity fee registration total, and then also they put in a November membership fee that will be coming for COVID-19, and then also a February membership fee of COVID-19, and both of those installments are going to be $3,500 a piece. And so just so people understand is that last year for the Minnesota High School League, we paid $3,850 total. And then that the total now for 2020-2021 membership fee total will be $13,153. So a little bit over 300% increase. So, but it's something that, I mean, we do participate in the Minnesota High School League. They definitely have a value in education and what they're doing. Nobody's excited about the increase, nor did they get the increase after budgeting. I think that was probably what I've heard most from school districts, that it would have been nice to have this happen before we set our budgets. But understandably, that if tournaments do happen, and if they can generate some revenue, there could be some potential reimbursement back to school districts that have paid, that if they have some more revenue than expenses, that some of that money can come back to school districts. So, and then just going forth, I checked with Minnesota School Board Association too on this, is that the activity fee registration total, that will be the new rate going forward. That isn't just because of COVID-19. And that the November, the membership fees that they're doing for installments wise is all based off COVID-19. So, at this point in time, hopefully, maybe it'll just be one, and maybe it'll be both. I don't know. Who knows right now? So, but anyway, that was kind of just the Minnesota High School League. It's a difficult time for them too. It was, I think, for a lot of people, and so. That is how they are addressing the shortage in funding at this point in time. And they won't meet, their directors do not meet until October. I think it's their next board meeting. So I have nothing to report other than the new fee structure, which I think all school districts have received now. And again, it's something that is just, it's difficult, I think, for all school districts, but in the same sense, I understand it too, that when you have 75% of your revenue just disappear, it's tough to balance the budget. So,
But they didn't have a balanced budget even before COVID.
No,
They were mismanaged well before this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they're saying that 75% of this issue is because of the tournaments not happening. Did they say how much of it's because of poor budget management?
I think that what their hope was, talking to one of the members of the task force, actually on an email that he sent me back, is that they were hoping to do it in stages, but because of COVID-19, it just became evident they were going to have to do everything all at one time. And not that they were hoping to do it that way, they didn't plan it that way, but that's just ultimately what's happened.
It's like a monopoly. I mean, that's what happens in a monopoly. You just jack your prices up, and nobody can do anything about it.
I find it amazing that all these years we asked for remote meetings and letting districts that were far away, well, that could never happen, and now magically it's able to happen. Yeah. Maybe they've saved money on not having to drive.
And they have, and they did say that, that is one thing that they do, and they reduce the travel and stuff like that, and their meetings are being remote, so they're not traveling down to the Twin Cities, and
Yeah, traveling in the Twin Cities.
so, down to Brooklyn, so,
It's far.
yeah. So, it's just one of those things that, yeah,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
I will say this is, I guess, just on a, philosophical, I'd rather have a Minnesota high school league than go to totally club sports.
Oh, I hear you.
So I think that would be
We have to
just
have
a
them.
bad thing, so, it's, yeah, like anybody, no, I mean, this is just kind of one of those things that's just, it's tough, I know they didn't want to do it, and hopefully this will be a short-term fix, and maybe we'll even get some money back, and depending on what happens here going forward, so. Any questions, other comments on that? Okay, Steve Vigas, legislative liaison, meet and confer, and curriculum review.
Meet and confer, did not meet and confer, and curriculum review did not meet as well. On the legislative side of things, there's some funding that is potentially coming from the state as they've received some federal funds. There's two different programs. There's GEER, G-E-E-R, which is the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, which makes up about 9% of the funding. But that's technology access, summer school, early childhood, and that's kind of at the governor's discretion in a way. 90% of it is something called ESSER, which is Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds, which gets 90% of that. That's more just given to districts to keep kids healthy and keep them learning. About $169 million is the pot. We, as a district, according to their little spreadsheet, are going to receive about $343,000, which is about half of the original proposed amount. If I'm reading that right, I hope.
Non-publics are included in that bucket too as well. So a small portion of that is non-public, so Hillcrest.
Okay. Well, I thought that was shot down though, on the federal level. It was a big story on the 4th where it was, our education secretary, Betsy DeVos, wanted to be able to have some of that allocated towards private sector schools, but the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that.
So a part of the calculation through the state,
Yeah.
we did build in an allocation for non-publics. The state required us to do that.
Okay.
They did take into that part of it where there might be changes down the road. And I haven't been up to date, I guess, on the Betsy DeVos side of it, from the
Okay.
federal government.
Yeah.
But I do know that we were required to allocate a certain percentage based on free and reduced numbers to the non-public schools that we have in our district.
Okay. It'd be interesting to see what happens with that, just given the news that's coming out about it now with it. I mean, as far as I knew, it got shut down, that we couldn't do that, but we'll figure that out, I guess, so.
Yep.
Let's see, so as far as the other funding, there's, on the federal level, they're negotiating a second round of relief, which includes schools, which is gridlocked right now. They don't have an agreement. By October, they'll shut down the government. So hopefully we'll have some more news as far as if the schools will be getting any more aid on the federal level. Governor Walz also was able to get the peacetime emergency period extended to October 12th. And, with this money that's coming, I mean, the state is facing a $2 billion deficit with everything going on. So it's Our legislators are gonna be busy. There's just not a lot to go off of, other than some of the money that we'll be getting. Maybe some of it's allocated to Hillcrest and those, whatever. And I totally fine if I'm wrong on that too, but it's, there's not a lot of concrete stuff going on right now, so we're just kind of waiting to hear. I think that's all I've got on the legislative side right now. So, that's it.
Any questions for Steve?
I don't have any questions, but can I add,
Yes.
Steve? So I know it seems like mostly that what they do is funding, but the legislature did last year make some changes for schools. And one of them was on the way that districts report on dyslexia. So that's a new change. They made decisions on schools being used as polling places, which I think that's not happening anymore. Also on the way that schools store medications that students take, or maybe even staff, I don't know. And then what happens to those medications if they're unclaimed at the end of the year. They made decisions on teacher licenses, Tier 1 and Tier 2, how those are being renewed. They had to make some adjustments at the end of last year because we could not have certain trainings. And then I guess there's been changes to IEPs too, so.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, Superintendent Drake.
All right, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm going to pass along a couple documents that I'll reference in my report. First of all, I just want to express my appreciation and gratitude for the many, many people that helped get the new school year underway. It was an especially large undertaking this year with all the provisions and planning that needed to take place. But for all the staff members, really appreciate all their contributions and coming back to a new school year. Very excited about our work with children. In the community, I do want to especially give some acknowledgement to Otter Tail coaches and also Otter Tail County Public Health, who've both been tremendous partners with us in the planning and preparation stages for the new school year. And also, of course, the 544 Education Foundation for all their support. They recently purchased the Chromebook covers, which really helps protect that investment of technology for our students. Just probably as much for the public's knowledge as anything, our county case rate per 10,000 did climb up to 11.9 last Thursday. It is expected to be over 10 again when the data is released to us this coming Thursday. That does fall within the Tier 2, which was our opening plan. Next, I want to shift to the enrollment update. You have two documents. I'm going to refer to this one that you have. So essentially, this document will show you by grade level whether we're up or down. And that's when you look at basically K through 12, that would include our brick and mortar 100% distance learners and the students that are coming in either 100% face-to-face, or if you're on the high school side, 7 through 12 under our current hybrid system. And the piece that I really want to highlight, first of all, for your information is the on the left quadrant, as you go down on that lower right, you see minus 106. This is quite significant for us. This would be the number of students we are down compared to a year ago in our 100% enrollment, whether you're doing completely distance learning or whether you're coming in for face-to-face instruction. Significant, not necessarily unexpected. I don't know as these numbers are maybe particularly different than what some other districts are seeing. I had heard from some districts in kind of this rural region a month or so ago that we're looking at possible loss of 30% of their enrollment with families that were choosing to homeschool. But still, this is very significant in terms of the impact that it has on our revenue, and a piece that I wanted you to be aware of. You can see, of course, the total number of students is much less, but the impact that it had on the ALC enrollment down in the bottom left. And then a completely different story, which again wasn't unexpected with IQ Academy. You see that it's obviously a statewide program where families can elect to put their students in a 100% online program, but their enrollment up significantly at the start of the year from where it was a year ago. As you look at the bottom two, I just want to make one clarification. I decided to just do the math after I had printed these, so I hand wrote a couple numbers in. The total district change up 211, that does not consider the early childhood number down, the -12 down below, so just be aware of that. And then also, the plus 211 is really just reflecting the increase in the IQ Academy enrollment. And that program, while useful to the district, isn't really it's not really a revenue producer in terms of some of the other expenses. That's not going to offset what I'm trying to say is that's not going to offset the -106 that you're seeing on our total enrollment in that upper left quadrant. So that's we're maybe a week early from what I would have preferred in order to share this information, but given the late start of the school year, this is what we have at this moment in time. We do know that we are still seeing changes. Had a meeting with the 3 building principals this afternoon, so we are still seeing some fluctuation with families and their plans for education this year. Does anyone have any question on the enrollment data?
Question.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, please, if for the ECFE numbers, do you also look at the Head Start program just in terms of potential incoming students into the kindergarten classes for whatever school year?
So the numbers down here, that's only
ECFE.
That's only our program,
Okay.
right? But when we would look at our kindergarten enrollment, we would look at Head Start.
Okay.
We would look at Children's Corner. So basically, we look at all those kids eligible to enroll in kindergarten,
Sure.
and then we go by history to say we'll capture. Let's say we capture 80% or 85% of that.
Okay, so just based off of prior averages?
That and the kindergarten roundup that we have in the spring, usually that would be in place at about March.
Okay, great.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question too.
Yes.
Is IQ Academy still going to cap their enrollment at 1,000 students this year? I mean, normally, we're not at 773 until spring,
Correct.
really. I mean, sometimes or much
Yep.
farther along in the school year.
There's been no talk of capping it right now. The biggest limiting factor really is our ability to staff the program. At some point, even though you may have people wanting to get in, we may not be able to find teachers to teach it. And so that will be, if the time comes, that will be kind of an interesting conversation between the district, who takes on the staffing role, and K-12, who is our partner organization with it.
Sure.
How far off was the estimate? from the roundup and all that, because we didn't really have that this year, and this is a weird year, I know, but
Yep.
was it a surprise that we had 180? Sorry.
So-
Oh, sorry, 165 plus 2.
Plus 3, right, so we have 165 plus some partials.
Yeah,
When we budgeted for kindergarten, we budgeted at 180 if I recall correctly. So we're down a little from where we had hoped to be there. You know, if I look at it, the thing that really that strikes me is the fourth grade.
Mhm.
And
do you have any explanation for that? Like what, nobody's telling you why they're leaving, or I suppose parents just don't enroll, right? Like,
yeah, I don't, I think that maybe a couple weeks from now I could have that for the board, but right now I don't know whether it was, you know, perhaps a parent cohort that got together and decided, you know, as a group we could homeschool. That could play a role in it. But I'm kind of speculating there, and we can ask a few questions and I can provide some more detail in a couple weeks.
Well, Jeff, I think the other thing is the fourth grade is a smaller class. If you look even last year, it's one of the smaller classes when you look at the ones above it and below it. What I like to do is I like to go like this and look from the class, the third grade last year to the fourth grade this year. And if you do that with each one, if you look at 1 through 4, that's minus 81 just for those 4 grades. The other thing I like to look at is we had 149 seniors leaving last year, but we have 170 kindergartners coming in.
Right.
So that's actually a plus 21, which means that our minus 106 actually comes out to a minus 127 if you add up all the numbers. So, because there's no comparison there with the seniors going out. But a good part of that is in grades 1 through 4, like I said, is a minus 81. So, you know, we're up 5 in 5th grade, we're up 2 in 7th grade from last year. Within that same age group, because they were a year younger last year. So, but it is pretty outstanding that it's a big number. And with the third grade going to fourth grade, there's a minus 27 there. 27 fewer kids in that class
Right.
than were here last year.
Yeah. So this. The document that you have in here is kind of handy to reference in terms of how many sections you would have offered per grade. And the way Kirby's looking at it really is reflecting the loss from one class moving down to the next grade. And all of that is helpful in understanding what your numbers are, how they got there, and the impacts that they have on your staffing and on your schedule in school. Any other questions on the numbers piece? I think that there's some hope, although frankly I'm not sure quite how the state would fund it. Some hope by school districts that our ADMs would be held harmless this year under the circumstances, so that we would receive the full aid as if our students returned to us in a normal school year. We know that organizations like MSBA and MASSA will approach the legislator about that. Whether that will gain any traction or not, it's hard to say. As I'll get to in a couple minutes, and Steve already alluded to it, the state has plenty of challenges on its plate fiscally already, so we will see how that whole thing plays out. On some positive news, the week before school was set to begin, the federal government came out and said there would be an extension of the meal service, essentially the summer meal service program that we operated under last spring. And so essentially what that does, we're thinking it will run through the end of December. So that's what we're hoping at least. is that children birth to 18 are eligible for free meals. We started out already on the first day of school providing free meals to the students in the school. Our next phase of that is preparing meals that families could take home or pick up for our students that are on either 100% distance learning or are on their hybrid day where they're not coming into school. And then the third phase is opening it up for pickup. So the second phase, families would register for those meals. The third phase would be preparing meals for pickup, probably at KSS, for any student, or I shouldn't say student, any child in the community up to 18. They could come in and we would distribute meals to them. So that's a very positive thing, and certainly helpful financially, both for our families and for the school district. On the technology side, we're still waiting for our back order of Chromebooks. That represents about 200 units. We hope to get those in a couple of weeks. We are hearing, not from our vendor, but some of the other vendors that are getting them from the same manufacturer. I think ours were HPs, that some of that's starting to come through now. So we're hoping that sooner rather than later we'll get those 200 units and get those distributed. So basically the impact that it's having right now, our priority was on the older students because we were starting out in a hybrid model, and in getting a device in all the students' hands that were 100% distance learning. And so right now with some of the earlier grades, you're seeing classrooms share a single cart, which historically is what would have been happening anyway. I want to thank Mike Donahoe for his efforts in getting the thermal temperature scanners installed. There were 12 units. By the first day of school, they were all operational. We are adding a 13th unit, and that should be installed on Wednesday out at the Prairie Science classroom. So we're excited about that. Just a couple of really quick notes on the Minnesota State High School League. They are meeting this week. They're going to talk about postseason play. And then on the docket has sprung up again the notion of volleyball and football and the possibility of moving them back to a fall season. So some big decisions on the horizon here for that meeting coming up this week. This document is a draft. But I think it's getting near finish form, but we wanted to do a comparison of what distance learning was like last spring to our plans to carry it out this fall. And I do want to just express my appreciation to the patience that our families had last spring. You used the phrase building the plane while you're flying it, and that's certainly what it was like 6 months ago. But we do have what we think is a much more robust plan with better supports this year and increased communication for families, and that kind of outlines what the differences are in that draft document.
It's the difference between 8 days versus, what, a month to prepare?
Right. Yes. On the strategic planning side, which we can talk about more in the work session, the curriculum committee I'm estimating has about 4 meetings left. Student culture and climate, 1 to 2 meetings. Staff culture and climate, 1 to 2 meetings. The facilities, my plan will be to get a meeting scheduled, our first meeting at the very tail end of September here. I also want to thank Linda Mellon and Tony Renz for all their commitment to the 544 Foundation. 2 very, very dedicated people to our public school district, and really had tremendous dedication to the foundation. Our PLCs this year will focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I'm excited about the work that we're going to do on that this year. And frankly, a lot of it is based on self-reflection and self-discovery, which is where, to me, that's where that stuff starts. And from there, we will take a good look at who we are, what we want to be as an organization. The MSBA Fall Tour, that was offered via Zoom here last week. I think there's still a couple sessions you can jump onto. Otherwise, if you go to the MSB website, you can access the slide presentation that was covered that night. Lots of good information. The one piece that just kind of struck me was the different 6 months made or 9 months made in the state's budget outlook. If you would have gone back to early February, the state was projecting a rather robust budget surplus. That entire thing has been completely flipped on its head. MSBA started to basically prep us that because we share or have a large share of the state's overall budget, be prepared that we will be affected in some way, shape, or form as the state moves to try to address its budget deficit. The most likely scenario that they painted is one that districts faced probably about 8 years ago now, and that was withholding of payments. And so instead of getting, let's say, 90% and 10%, they shift, it's a payment shift, and you get your payment delayed into their next fiscal year. So the main thing that it does to school districts is it can have a really challenging effect on your cash flow. And so you see a lot of districts needing to take out some contingency loans in order to meet their cash flow needs to cover their expenses while the payment delay or payment shift is taking place. So we will have to be very tuned in to what the legislative session does in the spring because there's a pretty good likelihood that it's going to have some impact on us that will be significant. And then the last piece of information is we found out really late this afternoon, we had applied for, it was about $130,000 or so, $120,000 in CARES fund through the city of Fergus Falls. Because we are a public entity, we are not eligible to receive those through the city. So I understand it, a little disappointing, we were hoping to get it, but we are not eligible. So unless there are questions, that would complete my report this evening.
Was the shortfalls and the delaying of payments, if you can refresh me, we have access to a credit line that's kind of a pooled credit line for school districts, am I right on that? Is that, or do we not? Is it just, we're just, when it comes to that kind of situation, like, what does the district do? Do we have a credit line for this kind of a thing for shortfalls, just like a regular business would have?
We currently do not have
Okay.
a credit line,
Okay.
but that can be easily done. We could go out and it could essentially go out for bid on a credit line if you want to do an area of financial institutions.
Sure, okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Moving on to our general consent items, we have the minutes for the August 24th, 2020 board meeting, bills and treasury report. Kirby Anderson.
Yes, the treasurer's report, we did start the month with about $11 million in the bank, and we finished right around 14, so we're sitting pretty good right now. Matt and I met with Blake, and we did review the bills. Some of had a few questions on them, a lot of annual things again. We did have about almost $150,000 where we bought additional computers for students. We also had settlement, I think that we talked about this in the past with RTL coaches that came through. The 544 Foundation did contribute some money for the Chromebook sleeves. I believe that was about $6,300. We did spend about $10,000 in computers, Apple computers. We have more IQ students, so we have more IQ staff. So we need more IQ computers for the staff. We had some some payments that went out for the Lincoln School. We got a scoreboard for the new fast pitch softball field out at D Lagoon. Other than that, some annual inspections for fire, a business I'd like to get into. Looks like there's some pretty good work there. But other than that, that's about it. Nothing really unusual. Is there anything to add, Matt? Thank you, Blake. Everything appears to be ordered.
And personnel, Elaine Jenke.
Good evening,
This is-
everyone. I have my own page
Getting us
today,
comfortable.
but in order to just be somewhat brief with it, I'm going to just give the names and the positions and such. Everyone can find the details on our website under the board minutes and also the agenda and such. Otherwise, it gets a little lengthy when I'm talking FTEs and start dates and things like that. So kind of bear with me. Certified staff hires. We have Jessica Hexam and Mariah Monkey. They're both doing long-term subbing in the middle school math area. Melissa Honorud, social studies teacher, she has an increase so that she is now teaching 1 FTE. Jennifer Jensen, she is going to be hired as a science long-term substitute teacher here at Kennedy. Terry Aho, Title I teacher, she was part-time prior to this and now she will be full-time, so you see our increase there. Peyton Sconson, he was hired initially at a .667 and now he'll be increasing that to a 1 FTE. Certified staff overload contracts, Ethan Solon, social studies teacher, Michelle Danielson, music teacher, and Kaylee Peterson, music teacher. So each of them have some various overload contracts that they have agreed to doing. Support staff hires, Jasmine Rockel, Title I paraprofessional, Liz Niblock, secretary long-term substitute here at Kennedy, Deborah Geese, student support aide, along with Deanne Preston, Amy Walter, and Danielle Ross. All of those are student support aides at our elementary schools. Wendy Fogard, paraeducator, long-term substitute at ALC. Kenneth Coons, part-time custodian at Roosevelt Education Center, and he is taking over for the retiring Gary Frederickson. Sarah Skelhaas, special ed paraprofessional, along with Danny Zarbuck and Carrie Ames. Danny and Carrie, they're both 4 days a week, basically at .5 FTE, just because of their timing that they came in. They're a little bit less there at the FTE, but they'll be doing a half-time days over at our Heritage Building with our little ones. Stuart Klostad and Leo Segura, both noon hour supervisors, one at Cleveland, Stuart being at Cleveland, and Leo at here Kennedy Secondary School. For support staff resignations, we have Lisa Runnigan, noon hour supervisor, Jennifer Jensen, Title I para, and as you saw, Jennifer Jensen resigned as a Title I para so that she could be a long-term science teacher with us. Tara Nadwick, ECFE aide, Taylor Samuelson, special ed paraprofessional, Karen Harper, and Joyce House, both noon hour supervisors, and Heather Johnston, also noon hour supervisor. Support staff retirement, Joyce Perez, accompanist, and we'll see a resolution later on under a new business for her retirement piece. And individual contract, Eric Strong, health and safety coordinator, effective this school year, and that will be replacing what we normally contract out with Lakes Country Service Cooperative. So I would request board approval for these many personnel items and changes.
Thank you, Elaine.
You're very welcome.
Can I get a motion to approve the general consent items?
So moved.
Thank you, Missy. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Steve. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Kirby Anderson.
Yes.
Natalie Knutson.
Yes.
Matthew Lemke.
Yes.
Missy Hermes, yes, and Stephen Vigasa.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to our old business, we have the revision of the School Board Policy 522, Title IX, Sex Non-Discrimination Policy, Grievance Procedure and Process. Can I get a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Missy. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Natalie Knutson.
Yes.
Matthew Lemke.
Yes.
Missy Hermes, yes. Stephen Vigasa.
Yes.
Kirby Anderson.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Under new business, we have, our first item is a resolution on the retirement of Joyce Perez. And Missy, do you want to read that for me?
Sure.
Thank you.
Whereas Joyce Perez began her employment with the Fergus Falls Public Schools in September of 2010 And whereas Joyce has been a valued employee with the Fergus Falls Public Schools for the past 10 years, and whereas Joyce has done an excellent job as an accompanist and substitute teacher for the district, and now therefore be it resolved by the Fergus Falls Public School Board to thank Joyce Perez for her 10 years of dedicated service to the Fergus Falls Public Schools. I'd like to offer that resolution and move for its adoption.
Thank you, Missy. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Steve. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Kirby Anderson.
Yes.
Natalie Knudsen.
Yes.
Matthew Lemke.
Yes.
Missy Hermes, yes. And Stephen Vigasa.
Yes.
The resolution is adopted.
Thank you. Item number 2 is our 2020-2021 contract for service with Lakes Country Service Cooperative for secondary vocational services. Can I get a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Kirby. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Missy. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Let's see, Matthew Lemke.
Yes.
Missy Hermes, yes. Stephen Vigasa.
Yes.
Kirby Anderson.
Yes.
Natalie Knudsen.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. That concludes our regular school board meeting. Following this meeting, we will go into a work session, talk about facilities update, start of the school year, and strategic planning. Our next regular school board meeting will be Monday, September 28th at 5:15 p.m. right here at the Otter Community Room at Kennedy Secondary School. With that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Steve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Kirby, any discussion? Roll call,
Oh,
please.
yes, roll call. Stephen Vigasa.
Yes.
Missy Hermes, yes. Matthew Lemke.
Yes.
Natalie Knudsen.
Yes.
And Kirby Anderson.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. We are adjourned.